Spicy guy, Helmut Marko.
Oh, no.
What's he done?
Do you apologise for that?
Hello and welcome to the Inside Track, the Formula One podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the biggest stories in the sport with exclusive access to Redbull racing. I'm broadcaster and Formula One fan Rick Edwards.
And I'm sports journalist Matt Magendy. And each week we bring you the latest F1 news, the backstage gossip, find out who's thriving, but also who's under pressure.
This season we have got the inside track on Redbull Racing as they fight to retain their standing as the fastest team on the grid. If you want to see all the action from us in the studio and from race day, subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Inside Track podcast. I just want to get straight into it. I don't want to beat around the bush here.
Yeah.
The end of that race was insane.
Yeah.
Where were you? What was it like being there?
So I was in an engineering office again, different to how it was in Monaco. So it's like one of their trucks, and part of that is that they bring everything over is converted into an engineering office. So back in the paddock behind the garage. So I'm in there, maybe 10 people in the room, different engineers, a lot of people I still don't know exactly who they are, what their roles are, so many in the team, and they're feeding different bits of information to the pit wall.
So my read on the 3-stop strategy that they were employing for Max was that it was really good.
Better, yeah.
Up until the safety car, which screwed it. But until that point, you'd say, well, that's a bit of a masterstroke.
Yeah, so what happened, they were planning a 2-stopper.
Yeah.
That was the aim. That seemed the conventional wisdom at the track. That was the way to go. But the tyre degradation on Verstappen's car was a little worse, I think, than they first anticipated. And they knew this was a possibility. They thought that three might come into play. So they did the 3-stopper. Their view was, when they ran through the maths of it, that it was still going to be quicker than Mercedes or Ferrari, and what they were doing on 2-stop wasn't going to be quicker than McLaren. So they tried it, and it was brilliant. Yeah, they came out, they showed genuinely quick, genuinely felt like they were putting pressure on McLaren, who were such a dominant car for the weekend. Yeah, and yeah, you're right. I think that 3-stopper by Hannah Schmitz was who was in charge of strategy for the race was a masterstroke.
Yeah, and if they'd been on 2-stop, they wouldn't have been anywhere near McLaren.
Nowhere near. It was a ballsy call. It felt at the time. I mean, I don't know enough yet about strategy, but it was one that paid off. Had that safety car not happened, you'd be applauding it. But instead, there was this mayhem at the end of the race.
That mayhem, a big part of it, probably was the decision to go on those hard tyres at the end. And that's the bit that I suppose I'm like, do they think that was a mistake? Or
so what I haven't been is in the I'd be interested to know the briefing that's happened back at the factory since, to see when they in taking a step back, properly dissecting, they'd be able to run the models, everything, all the stuff a bit better. But what happened? So the virtual the safety car comes out, and everyone's got a free pit. So you've got a choice. So Verstappen had a choice because he'd done his 3 stops. He could either go for the hard, and the only reason he could go for the hard, they were the only tyres that hadn't been used. Now, the problem was these hards, the C1s, weren't really working for anyone. So that was a bit of a push even for a few laps to take that gamble. And the other option was to keep him on these softs, these used softs. I think they had about 8 laps in them. But either option, he was a little bit of a sitting duck potentially. So they were trying to work out whether how many places he would lose as a result. So that was the call they made. Now, when I spoke to people afterwards, spoke to Pierre Vacher, for example, everyone was just like, well, hindsight, is a wonderful thing. Interestingly, Verstappen then walks past us at this point as he's walking upstairs to like his little room, and Pierre and I asked him what he thought about, and he said, hindsight, again, a wonderful thing. If we had hindsight, we'd all be billionaires, and gave me a smile, which I thought was quite a nice take on it all. But I
wonder how long he sat in his little room for.
He didn't immediately. I'd be interested to know what he was thinking afterwards. But
he was surprised by the decision at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like, "What the hell?" And then he then goes, "Oh, well, is anyone else on this?" And no was the call. But I don't know. What's the reality? Okay, maybe he wouldn't have then. He would have probably lost at least a couple of places. Maybe he wouldn't have had a ding dong with Russell and then penalised, etc. So you don't know. You really don't. It's very hard to have a full answer for what would have happened there. But certainly he was going to be costed places.
It feels like it sort of started a kind of weird chain reaction. The fact that he was on those tyres.
Absolutely. Yeah, it then sets off a crazy turn of events.
Yeah, like the dominoes were all just falling in a horrible way.
It just got more and more bonkers, didn't it?
So as you're in engineering, as each of those incidents occurred, what was being said?
So what's fascinating about being in that room, if you take off your headphones, it's almost total silence. Sorry, it's sort of tumbleweed across the room. You can't really hear anything because people are so focused on their role, and every now and again there'll be a little whisper into a mic, which you can then hear of what they're saying. When most of the things happened, it was all everyone staying calm, rolls. But there was one moment where I really liked that. I don't know who did it. Some engineer who won't be named. As Verstappen and Russell come together, I just heard a shout of, "Oh no!" And I just thought, no. I looked up.
That's the right response.
I thought that was funny. I looked up, thought that was funny, and I couldn't tell who'd said it, but everyone was just looking straight faced. But it was a perfect summary of what had just happened. Oh no!
One person who had a very lively weekend was Redbull strategist Hannah Schmitz, who you caught up with before the race, and we'll hear from her later on in the show. I don't know if we can unpick what was going on in Verstappen's head.
Yeah.
But from the outside, watching it at home, it looked like he just sort of lost it and just ploughed into the side of George Russell. I think that's kind of what George Russell felt as well.
Yeah, I think frustration built up of these different factors. We talked about the tyres and what that was meaning and his position, and he's suddenly under peril, and you hugely competitive animal out there on track. And then he did what I can only describe as sort of a red mist moment.
Yeah.
And did that. I don't think he was intending to cause a hideous sort of damage, but it was it was, when I watched it, I thought, oof, that's really not acceptable. But then I picked my words carefully in a way, but somehow there was a fascination within me seeing him do that, and echoes of like an Ayrton Senna, a Michael Schumacher, these guys who had such a desire to win like Max has. And I know he was not going for the win at that point, but such a desire to get every point you can possible that sometimes you do cross the line, and he did cross the line. And I think everyone accepts that. The team accept that. Max has come out with a statement himself, which was fascinating because he very rarely accepts faults, or I don't think publicly accepts fault. He might do behind closed doors.
I thought that was really interesting.
But
because you're right.
Yeah, and that I think diffused things to a certain degree after, because that's everyone we talk about. I was interested he came out with that comment. And it was quite fun that it happened with George Russell because they've had a few ding-dongs over the years as well. So if it was going to be anyone, it sort of seemed apt. It was those two.
And George Russell's reaction afterwards was also just quite funny. He's quite sort of diplomatic. But
well, I think what the F might have been his first response over the TV, over that bit, which again, much like the "oh no," was quite a good summary of what was happening. It's a fair question to ask.
And now we're in a sort of weird situation where Formula One drivers get points on their licence, just like we get points on our licence. Yeah. And Max is now on 11 points of a maximum 12. And so he's got to basically behave himself for 2 races, isn't it?
But it's a bit more complex than that in a way. And so two more races, he's got that at stake. But even after that second race, Austria, I think only 2 points get removed off the licence. So I think then he's still there's still quite a lot of the season left for that. I don't know when the other ones get removed, but I was just looking at that. And so, you might have to tread a little carefully in both Canada and Austria. But how do you do that when your instinct is to battle for every... So there is a danger. And, a race ban would be enormously costly. Last weekend was costly, but getting 0 points and not having anything from a race would be an enormous setback for them.
Was there any friction around the fact that Max did get some info, I don't want to call it duff info from the team, but he probably didn't have to give that place back, which he didn't want to, and that I think wound him up. And if he hadn't been asked to do that, maybe again, it's all part of that chain reaction.
So it was interesting when I was watching the race, my instinct was that he does have to give that place back, and that was the decision made. It was interesting hearing the conversations. Obviously, there's different people at play: GP, Hannah Schmitz, Christian Horner, but they felt, in light of how the rules have been and how people have been penalised for that, we've seen that already this season, that was the right thing to do. And you can see why they made that judgment. I thought it was the right judgment. But fascinating, and just added another twist to the story that the stewards go, no, we wouldn't have penalised. It's good. You were good as you were, which must be so
infuriating.
Because you just think, oh, God.
Also, it's quite easy for them to say that.
Yes, but I mean,
I'm not putting it to doubt there. But
you're just doing it to wind people up.
Well, But will there be a sort of... effectively, does someone at the team then apologise to Max for that, do you think?
They felt on the basis of the evidence they've had this season that was the right thing. I mean, do you apologise for that? I don't know. It's slightly confusing rules because in the past you could. So they feed this back over to the FIA. They feed this information back. In the past, you could have a bit of a dialogue, but they've changed that. They've sort of tightened that up. But there was nothing coming back, so they had to make that call. And you've got very little time in which to make that call in the heat of battle. Now, do you if you're going to have a 10-second penalty with the way that's getting, then you're going to be totally out of the points. So, you're sort of balancing the best case, worst case scenario. So it'd be interested to see when they get to Canada. They'll probably talk more publicly a team about that. But I've not been inside the debrief.
I think it's one of the first weekends that we've spoken about where you would say that is a very bad weekend for Red Bull.
Yeah, it really,
Been everywhere you look, like, well, that is not good.
I mean, it's a shame because it had been looking so good until that.
Yeah.
That it just shows the margins of these things, and the timing of a safety car. But yeah, not a good weekend at all.
A side issue.
Yeah.
But the fact that Isaac Hadjar keeps doing well and Yuki keeps doing not so well, that must be sparking some conversation somewhere.
Like, actually, Yuki's pace was pretty good, and again, he was also undone by the safety car. They were confident he was going to get up into the points by the end of the race. But
did they think that?
Yeah, they over the radio they seemed to be confident. Woody was saying good to pace. I don't know whether that really was the reality, whether that would quite have played out.
Outside chance,
but I mean, he was showing reasonable pace from a difficult position. But Isaac Hadjar, I just think he's such a cool customer. And I saw him. I was in the energy station, so Red Bull and Racing Bull, they share this sort of base together, and he was just such a sort of likeable character. This energy he comes across, and there he was, and he was hugging Terry Crews from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Robert Lewandowski. And they were sort of having a hug, like embrace photo, and I was like, this is very surreal. But he seems to take this sort of thing in his stride so much. Yeah, but I'm so impressed by what he does. He manages to stay out of danger, quietly go about his business, and he's a great driver. I don't think I had the highest expectations for him this season. He's definitely exceeded that. Same for you, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. Terry Crews, interestingly, just I think physically reminds me of you.
It's a very similar upper body strength.
It's the sort of, I guess it's the presence, isn't it?
Wow, he is bursting out of his t-shirts and tops. But
he's a big old
nice, but he's just like this sort of wave of positive energy wherever he goes.
Very nice, very funny man.
Yeah. Anyway.
Physically terrifying.
Yeah, he is very smiling, sort of assassin.
I don't think he'd kill you.
He could squash you though.
It's odd to sort of have spoken for 20 minutes now without mentioning sort of what happened in the race. But I imagine that this is exactly mirroring
at the conversations at the circuit. No one was talking about the McLaren 1-2. I mean, some people asking the drivers questions, but it was all about Verstappen, Russell. I mean, that was the story. And it turned what was a 1-2 easy McLaren dominating again into a great story. And everyone loves the theatre. Formula One is theatre, isn't it? And that's, it was, they sort of feel bad that the backstory is, and by the way, and then McLaren won and came second.
McLaren still doing quite well. Piastri was really good.
Yeah, really good.
All weekend.
There was a moment over the race radio, I think Christian Horner just very quietly, just one point goes, Piastri is blisteringly quick.
The other sort of standout drivers, I think, for me, well, I mean, Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
We're really happy with a podium that I don't think
unexpected.
He would have anticipated at all. And Ferrari are now second in the Constructors' Championship, which seems peculiar.
Well, they're the second best team. I was trying to work this out. Everyone's had their sort of.
I'm saying sort of instinctively no, but
there they are.
The table doesn't lie.
Well, but it's weird, haven't you? Had moments where we were sort of praising how consistent Mercedes and how well they were doing, then they fell off.
Yeah,
you've got Red Bull doing well with one driver, but just not every weekend, and then you've got Ferrari, who I guess have just quietly, consistently picked up the points. Yeah.
Although Hamilton, I mean, another not very good weekend. And you don't want to take anything away from Nico Hülkenberg, but I don't think Hamilton would be pleased to be beaten by Nico Hülkenberg in a Sauber.
Being passed, that was... I don't think anyone saw that coming. And what was weird for me in the race, I was so caught up in the Red Bull moment that I wasn't really paying attention to much beyond that because my attention was so much on that. And I suddenly look up and how's Hülkenberg finished there? I was like, where's he come from? But it was lovely to see later on, you can walk up and down the paddock and normally... Kick-Sauber's the last gap, so not as many people visit there as they might do McLaren.
No.
But there was a great gathering, such a noise and celebration. It was such a lovely moment for a team that doesn't always have those moments, and they had so much to celebrate. It was lovely.
I mean, you could make a really strong argument for him being driver of the day, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's sensational.
Did he? Who got driver of the day? Do you remember? He'd be a really strong contender, you'd think.
Was it just as simple as Piastri? It might have been.
Seems a bit of a boring one.
It does seem slightly
Although,
boring, but
hard to not give it to him because he was very good, I guess. So yeah,
you've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, and won the race.
Yeah, you've won the race. Producer Nick has just told me who got driver of the day.
Piastri. Then
not Piastri. I don't.
Not Hulkenberg.
Not Hulkenberg. I don't know if you'll get this.
Leclerc. I'm done. Are you all right? You having an episode?
Verstappen.
No.
No. The people who are voting for it have got a sense of humour. That's all you can say. Maybe George Russell's vote counts for 10.
Wow.
Is it because they do it bit like in football?
Yes, it can only be that.
With a few minutes left.
The vote's closed before he's ding-donged into his rival. That's fabulous.
Right, so all the votes in. Fantastic. What's he done?
I can't remember. Do they get an award? Does he get?
When he walked past you and said hindsight's a wonderful thing, was he holding?
No, he was wearing a driver of the day T-shirt,
which you assume was ironic.
That is the worst call ever, isn't it? Although to be fair, he drove very well to that point, or his team strategized very well to that point.
It completely depends on your criteria. If your criteria are most entertaining contributor to that race, him by a mile,
hands down,
absolute mile.
That's very good.
Alonso got a point.
Oh, I know. I sort of did. You think
which he needed?
Did you think like something was going to just go wrong at the end?
Assumed, yeah. So
is there a puff of smoke?
His rag again.
Why is a wheel hanging off?
Did you see this quite funny story about the Rome's taxi drivers taking issue with Toto Wolff, comparing them to Max Verstappen, and then all going, "We're actually fantastic drivers, by the way."
Well, what I liked that story because he compared them to Naples and Rome taxi drivers. Naples taxi drivers, fair play, guys. Fair play. But the Rome taxi drivers, there's some great quotes from some of the drivers. Yeah, taking proper umbrage was what's been said.
Yeah, and I like the sort of. I don't think it's quite an invitation for Formula One drivers to go and have a go at driving around Rome, but it almost is.
I don't know. Some clever marketing person within a Formula One team could surely conjure up something.
Yeah, get them in little Roman taxis.
Yeah, around the Colosseum. Or
I'd definitely watch it.
But I love stories like that. It sort of shows Formula One infiltrates all parts of the world.
All right, let's have a look at our Spain race predictions. We predict who's going to come first, second, and third. Point for each of the drivers who make the top 3. 3 points up for grabs. And then if we get the order exactly right, we win 6 points. We thought we might get a 6-pointer because you, and the AI all had the same 3 drivers.
But in a different order.
We are competing against the AI. We are also competing against the listeners and the viewers. You can submit your predictions by checking out our Instagram stories. Search at the Inside Track _podcast. Each week we pick one prediction to represent the audience. We will occasionally pick a prediction from a YouTube comment as well. So the AI have predicted first Piastri, second Verstappen, third Norris. So it gets 2 points. Audience prediction came from HW Sykes 1. Let's just say Harry Sykes. Had first Max, second Charles Leclerc, third Lewis. I mean, that's it's got to be really 1 point for the audience. I had Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, so I get 2. You have Verstappen, Norris, Piastri. You also get 2. My prediction was better than yours and not as good as the AI's, but we all get 2 points.
Yeah.
So the audience now trailing behind on 15. I still can't shake the AI.
Are you level?
Yeah, still level on 17, and you are out in the lead on 20. We've had an email. I think this is a good one actually from Ryan Norrie, and he says, "Hi team, hope you're all doing well. We are. Red Bull Racing has been incredibly successful in recent years, but at the same time, the team seems to attract more criticism than many of its rivals. Do you think Red Bull gets a harder time from the media and fans, and if so, why? Is it purely down to dominance, or does the team's leadership, driver management, or the way rivalries are handled play a role in that perception? Also, do the team feel there's a bias, particularly from the UK media, in how Red Bull is portrayed? And then kindly Ryan says, keep up the great work. I think this is a great question, and I think it's quite sort of multi-faceted.
Yeah, I don't know that they feel there's a bias towards them. They do have an us, against them. Sorry, they do have an us against them philosophy. Like we're always, we're together against.
But that's useful to have. That,
yeah,
anyway.
I think so. I mean, that's a tricky one to answer. I think part of it in Britain, they're seen as the rival to Lewis Hamilton, or long have been the rival to Lewis Hamilton, and now they're the rival to George Russell and to Lando Norris. So they're always going to be the villains because of 2021, and Max won the title instead of Lewis, and so there's that villainous thing. And I don't think they do anything sometimes to shy away from that. I don't know why they don't. Maybe they do get enough praise, but they're such a British success story. Like while they are an Austrian, part Thai owned, they're based in Milton Keynes. They employ a lot of British people. They're a real British sporting success story, which I think is amazing. And I mean, partly we're trying to show that sometimes. But will they care about how they're perceived? I don't know.
Probably not if they're still winning. But I'm certain. I mean, Verstappen has sort of alluded to it and actually spoken about it explicitly sometimes, that he thinks that the UK media are quite sort of, I don't know if he would say unfair on him, but see him as being the villain of the piece.
I wonder how Lewis Hamilton perceives the Dutch, for example. Does he get the same heat? I don't know if it works that same way, because Red Bull and Verstappen must get utter adoration.
In
the Netherlands.
Yeah. Well, they do. I think part of it is in Drive to Survive, Christian Horner is sort of painted again as the villain.
Yeah,
and
pantomime villain.
And I think he sort of relishes that and finds it quite funny and is happy to play up to it. And it all sort of works for the drama. And it feels like they're sort of complicit
He's playing to the character and the narrative. He said himself actually in the interview, well, it's a TV show. At the end of the day, it's a TV show, and you're acting or you're exaggerating your persona, your character, whatever within that. I think you're spot on. I do agree with that.
We've also had a message from Alex in Madrid, who said he'd love to have Fernando Alonso's bad luck. He's got a seat in Formula One, only available to 20 drivers worldwide. He's a multiple-time world champion, a multi-millionaire, and he's dated Taylor Swift, allegedly. Yeah. Point taken.
That's very good.
Next up, we're going to focus on Red Bull a bit more. Lots more to talk about. We're going to hear your chats with Hannah Schmitz, the strategist, who I think it is safe to say had a busy old day, and then one of the big bosses, who is a spicy guy, Helmut Marko.
Oh, you've interviewed him as well.
Yes, I have, yeah. I like him.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing to address is there has been another piece of Max Verstappen-based drama. I'm here, smugly drinking my coffee out of my Yuki Tsunoda mug. You are drinking from a plain mug.
No branding.
And your Verstappen mug has gone missing.
I don't know if there's a George Russell fan in the building that has smashed into it, or a Max Verstappen fan that's taken it. Yeah, I don't know. Me and producer Nick couldn't find. We did a little bit of a cupboard search. So hopefully there'll be no recriminations. If someone could please return it, and no questions asked, we'd like it back for the next recording.
Are we offering a reward at all? Or?
We'll make you a cup of tea in a non-branded mug.
In a plain mug.
Or coffee, if that's your...
Or a shout-out on the podcast, by all means. To the mug thief. Let's talk a bit more about Hannah Schmitz particularly.
Yep.
So she's on the pit wall. You've spent a lot of time with her before. She's been on the podcast before. And you spoke to her before the race to try and establish what they were thinking pit stop wise. Yeah,
which is really nice that her and or Will Courtney will take the time to do that and explain what their plans are for the race. And so I spoke to Hannah before the race to find out if their aim was to do what the sort of perceived wisdom was as a pre-race of a two-stop strategy.
That is probably the default and what I expect most people will do. But I think there could be some 1 and some 3 stops as well. So I'm kind of open. It's very unusual, but there's open to 3 different types of strategies happening here.
Max, looking at it sensibly, I guess, from my perspective, would it be a soft, medium, soft for him? Would be
probably we'd like to avoid the hard tyre. I don't know if everybody will avoid it, so there might be a couple of people that run it, but that would be what we want to do. And we're looking at more like soft medium would be your default. Saving the slightly longer range tyre for the final stint is more classically what you do, and using the soft to try and undercut people at the first stop or protect against an undercut.
We'd like to avoid the hard tyre.
Yeah.
Spoiler, Max.
No, but I mean, that's what they were planning to do. If it hadn't been for a safety car, they'd slightly
But it's quite funny to hear that.
But
it's a good hindsight thing.
I love the bit where, because basically they suddenly realised that the degradation on Max's tyres are much heftier than they thought. So they realised...
I realise how deep you're getting into Formula One now when you say things like deg.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have shortened that, but
No,
anyway, I love it.
no.
Getting too ensconced. And she then essentially sends a message, you can push the car now, so just go for it, you don't have to save the tyres. And she says, we'll still beat Ferrari and Mercedes. I'm not sure if we'll beat McLaren, but at least it's something different. And I just love that. They're just like, okay,
let's try
something. I know we touched on that before, but I just thought that was the first bit that I noted down. One other bit I liked, which is less serious, but suddenly at lap 34, GP comes on and goes, sorry, I've got hiccups. I thought it was wonderful. I hadn't noticed it, but it was just a funny moment. And actually, there's quite a lot of humour. There was a moment where he talked about gear shifting. Again, Verstappen was struggling and said, is it Monaco? Is it 1972, which is a reference back to last time?
Yeah,
and he said, no, more 1974. And I love it. He's even able to crack jokes at 200 miles an hour.
It's incredible to think that you'd be able to do that. Yeah.
But yeah, there was a point also when... Even you hear other teams and McLaren were coming on saying there might be an issue with Norris's tyres, but I think then that was mind game, because then Paul Pedals Monaghan, who we talked about before, he then looks and goes, nothing wrong with the tyres. And I loved that they're all trying to feed different false information to each other. And Red Bull straight away knew what they were doing, and I assume McLaren know when Red Bull are doing something similar. So I loved all of that bit. It's the bit between the race engineers and the drivers that each team can hear that, and actually you see when you're watching on TV those clips play out. So that's where they sometimes put a little bit of false information. I like that. The bit you can't hear, other teams can't hear, is the overall team radio of an individual little bits that they're talking about during the race. But it's just a sort of fun, quirky part of it.
It's nice because you get occasions where a team will say, "Whoa, I've got a bit of a problem with the front wing here," and then someone in another team will just go, "No, they haven't."
It's exactly that.
It's such a nice little game.
It's just a game. It's almost childish. How wonderful
it is childish.
Yeah, I love it. But then there was the first bit where differences sort of opinions, and this is great in a race. You know, people are judging when to do the next stop, and Hannah suggested it. GP was first, didn't think it was right, but then agreed. And I like that there's that collaborative conversation in the heat of the battle, that they're bouncing these ideas off each other in quick time to make the calls. And I loved all of that. That, you know,
who makes that call ultimately? Is it GP?
Well, he's the one that gives the information.
Yeah.
But it's either the strategist makes it, but then it's quite often is okayed by Christian as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly in that moment who, but GP delivers that message to Max and tells him, you know, box, which you always hear that. So it comes to that point, but it's just fascinating. Then we had the hard tyre situation, and that bit where, you know, Max is perplexed that that's been the decision, but the team seemed to think that, you know, that was the right call. That was and GP even says on the radio that that's the only option. And then
they will have run all of their simulations now.
Yeah.
If he had just stayed on,
it'd be interesting to know when I speak to them next what they would have felt would happen. I mean, you can't say for sure, because you don't know if there might have been another ding dong, if giving up place there might have been a crash. You never know how it'll play out exactly, but you'd think, would it potentially have played out better than it did? I mean, it certainly could have done, couldn't it? But then you don't.
He was struggling a bit with the hard tyres, and that
you could see straight away a sort of wobble as he was. You know.
Yeah. To a more casual Formula One observer, it is a bit weird that a team would sort of run out of tyre options. You sort of imagine they're just going to have whatever they need,
well,
but
yes.
you don't,
so
do you?
you have a set number of tyres. Like, they're not going to want to waste loads of tyres and burn through tyres endlessly. That's not great. So you've got a set number of tyres to use that you use throughout the weekend, through qualifying, through the race. And so when it came to the race, they had the sets they had remaining available were 2 softs, a medium, and hards galore because no one was using the hards. I think they thought initially going into the weekend the hard might be all right, but no one could make it work in practice. So that was the sort of least good option, I guess, of a tyre for that, specifically for that circuit.
Is it odd, given this is sort of the most elite level of motorsport, that you wouldn't just sort of give them whatever they needed rather than a finite amount of tyres? I mean, that'd be quite a big rule change.
But isn't it fun to have a bit of jeopardy? It creates a bit more jeopardy. We wouldn't have anything to talk about now.
Yeah,
we wouldn't be talking about
take
this.
that back completely.
That you need the tyres of where the jeopardy is coming in. A lot of how those tyres performing and breaking down, because that creates more stops, which creates a more interesting race, more interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's quite nerdy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but you like it.
I think so.
Yeah, you're not sure.
I think so.
I
waver a little bit.
I'm getting more into
this
it.
This guy's slower because he's run out of the good tyres.
I'm getting more, but it's part of the case. It's part of the race. The tyre technology, the actual race on track. I love it all. How it all comes together.
Now, you also sat down with your friend of mine, Helmut Marko. He is. I'm never quite sure what my introduction to him is.
I've always called him motorsport consultant, and for some reason, journalistically, when I was writing things, that's what it was. And but he introduced himself differently as director of one of the directors at Redbull Racing. I described him someone the other day. He's a bit like a minister without portfolio. He's sort of just this very powerful figure that has a big say and a big sway in the team. And he's got so much experience. He's been there for the duration of the team.
He feels like someone who, irrespective of who is in the meeting, he could walk straight into it and sit down at Red Bull, and that would be fine. Yeah, I think at any level. He's
got a lot of respect for the drivers. I mean, he's unearthed some pretty special talents over the years.
Yes, you can't really argue.
And he's a funny guy. Actually, I think he's got
he's
good
funny
sense of
and
humour.
He's very. Is I would say from Red Bull's point of view, sometimes worryingly forthright. It's good for us, though. Well, let's hear a bit of your chat with him.
You can't have ever envisaged you'd have the success that you have had with this team. Could you?
No. I mean, when the decision was done that we will buy Jaguar, Mr. Mateschitz said, okay, we will try it. Maybe we can win a Grand Prix once.
And you've won quite a few Grand Prix and championships and everything since.
Since that, I don't know the number exactly, but I know the championships. We had 8 driver championships and 7 constructors championships. Now we are still fighting for a 5th title with Max. At the moment, it looks like McLaren has a faster car, but we never gave up. And let's see what the changes in the regulations will have, what effect it will have here.
So you'll be able to hear the full version of that chat in next week's deep dive episode. A couple of things to pick up on. Firstly, he mentioned the new regulations coming in. What difference have they made? Will they make?
So we talked a lot about that last week, didn't we? They would make potentially make a difference. I think Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari boss, talked about it being a game changer. McLaren steadfastly said it's not the silver bullet you think it's going to be, and so it proved.
McLaren were right.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, and I think Red Bull had been more hopeful a further few weeks ago, and I think they began to realise before this race that wasn't going to be the case. I think they really, didn't think it was going to be an enormous shift.
Lewis Hamilton had a view on the regulations, I think.
I can't remember his exact wording but essentially it was a total waste of time and they shouldn't have done it. And I think the cost was into 6 figures for each team to make the change to their front wings. And his suggestion was that money should have just gone to charity.
I think that's a slippery slope. To be honest, I think
he was venting his frustration that they'd gone down this route that didn't prove to be what it had been hoped by some.
But then, you just don't know, do you? Like, none of the teams know. I mean, I know McLaren were sort of reasonably confident, but got to try these things. Yeah. Anything else we need to talk about? I mean, I suppose we've touched upon Yuki Tsunoda's performance. 13th, last in qualifying. You know, it's not a great weekend.
Yeah, it wasn't brilliant. Like, as I said, they thought the pace was pretty good in the race. What's interesting is he'd had this. We talked a few weeks ago about him having this test run in Silverstone. It then absolutely bucketed it down, so hardly got any laps. But he's done some testing in Barcelona, so not with this year's car, a different car. So to get a better feel, and I think that'll aid him, because his pace is often in practice very good, and he just can't quite translate it in Q3 in the third qualifying session in that shootout for a top 10 place, or in the race itself. And I get the feeling from everyone sort of willing him to do well, and that he's nearly there. It just needs it to click, and I think there's plenty of breathing space there for him to do so. No one's breathing down his neck saying there's pressure. You know, your job's on the line.
Yeah.
It's not that. I think they feel he'll come good. There's enough to see that the raw pace against Max can be there, and he can be within a tenth of a second, which against a driver who's supposedly the only person who can drive this car, that shows there's some raw pace there.
Yeah, although as soon as you say they're just waiting for it to click, I think back to a couple of months ago, and we were saying exactly that about Liam Lawson. You just need, it'll be fine. It just needs to click, and then needs to find the window, and it'll be all right. You ran around the circuit, did you?
So what was going to happen initially? So some of the drivers at some circuits either walk or cycle the circuit, and Yuki was going to do that on the bike, so I was going to go round with him, but then he chose not to do it. So I thought, since I was going out on the track, I'd have a run. And I may have gone a bit earlier in the day than I'd anticipated. So it's about 26 degrees, lovely day, and the track is a little over 5k, and a bit hillier than you anticipate on the TV. And it was just me running around, but clearly I wasn't doing brilliantly, because a bicycle comes past me, and this Finnish voice just turns to me and go, "You all right?" And it was Valtteri Bottas cycling past, this red-faced, sweating Englishman coming to the end of his lap. I said, absolutely fine.
You travelled back with Lando Norris's parents?
Oh, yeah, because where I live...
The life you lead.
Well, it was an EasyJet flight, to be fair.
Okay,
it was very sweet. I saw
right.
them arrive at the airport, and I don't know the parents at all, but Lando's dad is wearing his cap, his Pirelli cap from the grid, saying second, and also, because they hadn't been home between races, on his bag he had the first place cap, which is very sweet. And they sat down just when I was just having something to eat at the airport before getting on the flight. And they sat just along from there, but also next to this young kid with his dad. And Lando's dad pulls out a McLaren cap and goes, "Would you like this?" And obviously the kid didn't know who this was. And the kid goes, "Oh, no, thanks. I've already got one of those." He goes, and the dad, you can see the dad suddenly looking a bit panicked at this point. And they go, "Well, you never guess who's been wearing this one." And it's Lando Norris. He was like, this kid's in a Lando Norris McLaren top. So it was but they just seemed really nice, down to earth people. It was just quite a special moment.
Can you imagine how proud you'd be?
Oh, they must be so proud.
So next race on the Formula One calendar is Sunday, the 15th of June in Canada. So we've got a week break in the race schedule. Everyone can kind of regroup and go again. Overall, from this triple header, how will Red Bull be feeling, or how are they feeling?
It had gone okay. It had gone, as probably I think as expected, maybe better in some cases. But then obviously that last bit of how the race played out. So they'll be thinking, we're quite a bit behind, or Max is quite a bit behind Piastri now. That's a reasonable points disadvantage. So, but I think they are so good at designing and developing in season. I think almost better than any other team. So they'll be thinking, let's heads down. We've got some time before Canada. Let's just work on it. So I think they'll be more driven than ever, more motivated. And I kind of love that. And they'll come out, in theory, all guns blazing in Montreal. There's plenty to play for, but they do need to close that gap on the McLarens, and fairly sharpish.
Yeah, they're really having to fight sort of tooth and claw, whereas it feels like McLaren, not that it's coming easy. They've worked incredibly hard to get where they are, but the car is
They're
great.
making it look easy, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. They are.
It's very impressive.
Particularly Piastri, to be fair to him, who sort of just gets
Such
on
a
with
dude. He's so cool, isn't he?
Yeah. I do wonder if he's a bit boring, but that's by the by, really. With Lando, you get nice vulnerability and stuff. With Piastri, you just sort of go, "Oh, it's easy, is it? Okay, fine." Conditions, type of circuit is Canada. I mean, I like it.
Yeah.
I guess we've got no idea what the conditions will be like at this stage, but
yeah. I haven't looked at the forecast that far ahead of what it's like. It can be changeable, can't it? And we've had some crazy wet races there, but
I love a wet race.
Yeah, I love Montreal. I know we talked about it on some of the favourite. Yeah,
that would make Verstappen very happy, I
Yeah,
think.
I think so. You'd hope Red Bull think they can take the fight to McLaren at a circuit like that one, but yeah, we'll wait and see.
Right, should we do our predictions then for Canada?
Yeah.
AI, I can now see what AI is doing. It just gives you the last race results and then predicts those,
right.
which is not unwise,
Not
as
stupid.
discussed. So it's gone Piastri, Norris, Leclerc.
Yep.
I am going Norris on the fight back, Piastri, and then I think I'm going to go Russell. I think, I'm going to go Russell because I think that Mercedes will regroup a bit in this gap and come back. And also, I think quite a good result for him this weekend. So yeah.
It's quite interesting. I don't know quite. I think I'll go. It's sort of a bit similar to what I did before. Maybe even I'm going to go. Piastri
Pathetic.
to win.
Yeah.
Well, I thought about putting Verstappen to win,
Yeah.
which I had last time. So Piastri, Verstappen, Norris. I'll go in that order.
So next week's episode, we're going to hear more from your interview with Helmut Marko.
Yeah.
Did you really get into it with him? What kind of stuff did you ask him about?
A lot of things. I'm fascinated at age of 82, I think he is, that he's still doing this.
Is he 82?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Looks good for 82.
He does look good for
And he
82.
has no plans to retire. Like, he's still just going to keep on going because he's got this burning passion for it. And I loved almost like a twinkle there as he's talking about Max Verstappen and first seeing him as a 15-year-old and just something different. I don't want to spoil too much about it, but things like that. Talking about Yuki and Max, talking about the next talent coming through, talking about Isaac Hadjar as well, who we talked to earlier on, and how impressed he's been. Like, it covered a lot of ground, actually.
How did he leave I just imagine with Helmut Marko that he might just sort of in the middle of you speaking, just walk out of the room.
Yeah, I can't.
That's how I'd like him to leave.
I can't. I think, like when I finish the conversation, thanks very much, have a great weekend.
He definitely wasn't still there.
He's already getting it.
That's what I mean.
Helmut.
Lovely to okay. Okay.
And then felt like we had a real connection. And then when X walked past him, hi, Helmut.
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's having to talk to a lot of people. So you can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok. You can watch us on YouTube. Subscribe to us while you're on there. Links are in the podcast show notes. Please do also rate the podcast on your app of choice. And if you write a review, we will read them out if they're nice. And if they're not, then we might also still read them out. Send in your predictions for the next race. Who's going to make the podium? You can do that by checking out our Instagram stories or leave a comment on YouTube. Links again in the show notes. You can also send in any questions or thoughts about the show. Our email address is theinsidetrack@bbc.com. We'll see you at the same time next week for Matt's chat with Helmut Marko. And then a week after, we'll both be back to review the Canadian Grand Prix. The Inside Track is funded and made by BBC Studios, a commercial company that is wholly owned by the BBC. It's produced by Nick Thompson. Video editing and social media is by Georgina Revel. James Cook is the executive producer.